My name is Sienna Brooks, and I'm 32 years old. On paper, my life doesn't look like something you'd put on an inspiration reel with orchestral music and a sunrise. It's not glamorous, it doesn't sparkle. But it's solid in a way only people who know the weight of due dates and interest rates really understand. I'm a custom furniture maker. I own a small workshop on the edge of an industrial district, squeezed between an auto body shop and a place that sells tile and granite. I build high-end bespoke tables, chairs, cabinets, the kinds of pieces people call investment furniture in hushed, reverent tones. My reality is less glamorous. I end most days covered in sawdust and sweat, with a pencil behind my ear and glue on my fingers. My shoulders ache, my nails are ruined, and there's a permanent callus where my palm hits the sander. It's not pretty, but it's mine. The tools, the sketches pinned to the walls, the smell of fresh-cut wood, it all exists because I refuse to be the kind of person who just looks at a catalog and orders something someone else made. I build things that outlive trends and hashtags. What people don't see when they see small business owner on paper is the line of credit quietly breathing down my neck, the way my heart counts every dented tool and late invoice. They see artisan. I see amortization schedules. I met Julian West 4 years ago. Julian is the kind of man who looks like he was born on velvet. Clean lines, expensive watch, the kind of jawline that gets used in cologne ads. He works in art curation, modern installations and gallery experiences, he said the day he walked into my workshop. He'd been referred by a designer who knew my work. He needed a set of custom display pedestals for a gallery opening, something minimal but soulful, as he put it. I remember wiping my hands on my apron, trying not to look as tired as I felt, while he walked around my showroom like it was a museum. He ran his fingers over the edge of a walnut dining table I'd just finished. "You built this?" he asked. "Every joint," I said, "even the mistakes." He laughed. He liked that. Julian liked authenticity, as long as it could be framed with good lighting and white walls. Somewhere between the measurements and the delivery, between his visits to check progress and the way he'd stay longer than he needed to, we slipped from client and vendor into something else. Coffee turned into late dinners. Quick visits turned into slow mornings. When he asked me to be his girlfriend, it was in my workshop, standing between stacks of lumber and a half-finished bookcase. His tie was loosened, he was holding takeout containers, and he said, "I'd like to stop pretending I come here just to check on pedestals." I said yes, of course I did. There was one small problem with Julian. His family. The Wests are rich. Not we do well rich. Not we have a vacation home rich. Old money. Board of 3 charities. People whisper when they enter a room rich. The kind of rich that looks down on people who work with their hands and calls it concern. His father, Frederick West, 61, has made an entire life out of owning things, companies, properties, people, in a way. He has that polished, effortless contempt that doesn't even bother hiding itself. His suits are tailored. His insults are too. He'd visit Julian and casually jab at me like it was a sport. "Sienna, must be nice to just make things," he'd say, swirling his wine. "So rustic." Or, "Julian, darling, are you sure you want to go to her workshop? You'll get splinters." He never said beneath him out loud. He didn't have to. It hung in the air between every word. Julian would wince and roll his eyes. "Dad, stop," he'd murmur, embarrassed. Later, he would hold me in my tiny kitchen and say things like, "You know I'm not like them, right? I love what you do. My father's just old-fashioned." I believed him. I wanted to. So when Julian proposed, I said yes before he even finished the sentence. He did it in a way that still makes my chest ache to remember, in my workshop again, but this time he knelt in the sawdust in the middle of the floor with a velvet box in his elegant hands. "Sienna Brooks," he said, voice trembling, "will you marry me so I can keep pretending I know anything about wood grain for the rest of my life?" I laughed. I cried. I said yes. I slipped the ring onto my finger, a 2.5-carat stone that glittered like it was trying to blind my imposter syndrome. I built a custom walnut box for it myself, as if I could contain the future inside. Then came the engagement party. Julian wanted it at his parents' country club, of course, the one with the 6-figure initiation fee and a waiting list that included people whose names I'd seen in magazines. He sat me down with that pleading, hopeful look. "I know my dad can be a lot," he said. "But this matters to them. They want to host. For appearances, you know? Let's just let them have this." I hesitated. My parents are a retired librarian and a nurse. Their idea of a party is a backyard barbecue where someone brings potato salad in a reused margarine tub. But I wanted to be gracious. I wanted to be the kind of fiancé who could move between worlds. Okay, I said, we'll do it at the club. A week later, Frederick asked to have a word. We were in his study, the kind of room that smells like leather and money. He sat behind his desk. I sat on the edge of a chair that probably cost more than my first car. Sienna, he began, in that smooth, paternal tone that always feels like a setup, about this engagement party. I've seen your guest list. It's quite full. I clasped my hands in my lap. We both have people who love us, I said carefully. I wanted to make sure everyone important was included. Of course, he said. I will, naturally, cover my own guests. Our family, my associates, our friends. He smiled like a knife. Your contingent, however, will be your responsibility. It took me a second to process. My contingent? I repeated. Your parents, your friends, the tradespeople, he said, as if he couldn't quite remember that tradespeople meant the people I live and work with. I think it's only fair. You understand, I'm sure. He didn't look at me as he spoke. He looked at the decanter on his desk, at the framed photos on the wall, at anything but the woman he'd just handed a bill to. My face burned. For a moment, shame and fury fought for space in my chest. Julian's mother, Clara, shifted uncomfortably in the corner. Frederick, really? I am being perfectly reasonable, he said. Julian is marrying someone independent. Surely she would prefer to pay her own way. I heard the word, independent. The way he used it like charity case with lipstick. Something cold and stubborn rose up in me. You know what, Frederick? I said, my voice steady, even though my pulse was not. Don't worry about it. I'll pay for the whole thing. He finally looked at me then, faintly amused. The whole party? Yes, I said, meeting his eyes. All of it. Julian, who had just walked in, froze. Sienna, no, he said. It's thousands of dollars. I've got it, I said, still staring at his father. I wouldn't want to burden you. Frederick's mouth curved into a small, satisfied smile. As you wish, he said. So I did. I put the deposit on my business Amex and tried not to flinch at the number. The quote made my stomach drop, $200 for one night. It was almost everything I had saved. It was the planner I'd been dreaming of, the down payment on a new truck, the margin of safety that kept my business breathing. But I told myself it was an investment in my future, in our future. Last night was the party. The country club looked like something out of a movie. Chandeliers glittered, a string quartet played tasteful music in the corner, and people with names like Biff and Muffy milled around in clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My parents arrived in their Sunday best. My mom smoothed her thrift store dress 3 times in the foyer. My dad kept fiddling with his tie. You look perfect, I told them, linking my arms through theirs. You belong here as much as anyone. They smiled, but their eyes kept darting to the crystal, the white tablecloths, the waiters gliding past with trays. I spent the first hour getting them drinks, walking them around, making gentle introductions. Julian flitted from group to group, kissing cheeks, shaking hands with people whose last names came with foundations attached. Every time I looked up, he was across the room, laughing with someone I didn't know. By the time dessert was cleared, my feet hurt, my cheeks ached from smiling, and I felt more like an event coordinator than a bride-to-be. Then came the toasts. Frederick, of course, took the microphone. He stood at the front of the room, champagne flute in hand, the picture of gracious patriarch energy. The room quieted. The quartet faded out. The only sound was the clink of glassware and the soft murmur as people turned their chairs. To Julian, he began, looking at his son with a fondness that always seemed reserved for public moments. My brilliant, successful son, you've always had exquisite taste in art, in fashion, in life. He paused. His eyes slid to me, then to my parents. And when you brought Sienna home, he continued, chuckling, I'll be honest, I was concerned. Laughter rippled through the room. The kind of practiced, indulgent laughter rich people use when they're being told it's safe to be cruel. It's not every day, Frederick went on, that a son who has had every advantage decides to marry. He leaned into the microphone. Well, let's be honest, about 10 rungs below him. The room erupted, not in gasps, in laughter. Loud, delighted, unrestrained laughter. I watched it happen like a slow-motion car crash. I saw my mom's face drain of color, my dad's jaw tighten as he stared down at his folded hands. I saw strangers' shoulders shake, saw mouths curl around the word rungs like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. And then I saw Julian. He was laughing, hand over his mouth, shoulders shaking, eyes crinkling as he looked at his father like he'd just delivered the punchline of the century. He caught my gaze across the room, still grinning, and gave a little shrug. What can you do? It's just Dad. In that second, something inside me went very, very quiet. The music, the clinking glasses, the laughter, it all faded into this hollow, ringing silence. It felt like someone had opened a window in my chest and let the heat out. I heard myself laugh, just once, a short, sharp sound that cut through the room. Frederick, startled, turned toward me and tilted the microphone. "Ah," he said. "She's a good sport. She knows it's true." I stood up. I smoothed my dress with hands that didn't shake. I walked toward him, each step feeling weirdly detached, like I was watching myself move. "He's right," I said, my voice carrying easily through the room. The laughter died instantly. Frederick blinked. "He's absolutely right," I repeated, taking the microphone gently from his hand. "Thank you, Frederick. Really, for your honesty." The room was so still I could hear the air conditioning. I turned to face everyone. The chandeliers reflected 100 little versions of me, tiny, distorted, holding a microphone in someone else's world. "You've made me realize something important," I said. "Julian is marrying 10 rungs below him, and he deserves someone on his level, someone appropriate." A murmur rippled through the tables. I looked at my parents. My mom's eyes were glassy. My dad's knuckles were white around his napkin. "And I continued, my throat tight but my voice steady, deserve a family that doesn't see me as a punchline. I deserve a partner who doesn't laugh when I'm publicly humiliated. And my parents deserve to be treated with respect, not as a contingent." I turned to Julian. His smile was frozen now. "Sienna, what are you doing?" he hissed, his face paling. "You're making a scene." "No," I said softly. "Your father made a scene. You laughed at it. I'm just ending the show." I lifted my glass slightly. "To Julian," I said, "I wish you the very best. The wedding is off." I set the microphone down on the nearest table. Someone gasped. Someone else dropped a fork. The silence was deafening. Julian grabbed my arm. "Sienna, you can't be serious. This isn't funny." "I'm not joking," I said. I walked past him, past Frederick's stunned expression, past Clara's trembling hand on her pearls. At the edge of the room, the event coordinator stood like a statue near the doors. "Could I get the final itemized bill, please?" I asked her quietly. She stared at me, then hurried off. A minute later, she returned with a freshly printed statement. Her hands shook as she handed it over. The total glared up at me. $19,200. Already charged to my card. I walked back to Julian. He was breathing hard, like he'd just run a race. "Sienna, let's just go outside and talk," he said, forcing a smile for the watching guests. "We can fix this." I held out the paper. "You should keep this," I said. He didn't take it. "What is it?" "It's the bill I just paid," I answered. "For your party, with your friends, at your club. You and your father can figure it out." He finally took the paper, looking down at the amount like it was written in another language. "Sienna," but I was already turning away. I went to my parents' table. My dad stood up without a word and put his hand on my shoulder. My mom looped her arm through mine. "We're leaving," I said. We walked out of that glittering room full of people who'd just laughed at my humiliation. Out past the hostess stand, past the marble lobby, out into the cool night air that felt like the first honest thing I'd breathed all evening. By the time we reached my truck, my phone was already buzzing. Call after call, message after message. I didn't answer. I started the engine, the sound loud and rough and real. As we pulled away from the country club and its chandeliers and its laughter, the reality settled over me like a weight and a strange, sharp relief all at once. I had just blown up my engagement. I had just walked out on a man I loved. And I had just put $19,200 of humiliation on my own card. For 3 days, my phone might as well have been a brick. I left it on the workbench in my apartment the first night, screen lighting up the dark like a tiny, persistent ghost. By the second night, it lived on silent in a kitchen drawer, buzzing against the spoons. By the third, I was timing the vibration patterns without looking at the screen and could tell which ones were from Julian versus everyone else. The messages all followed the same script. From Julian: "How could you do that to me? You humiliated me in front of my entire family." "Dad was joking, Sienna. You can't take a joke? You overreacted. You need to call the club and fix this. That bill is yours." From Clara: "Sienna, dear, I think this has all been a terrible misunderstanding. Frederick's sense of humor is..." an acquired taste. Julian is devastated. Why don't you come over with some flowers, sit down with him, and we can all smooth this over? And then, one that made my stomach twist even before I pressed play. From Frederick. Sienna, his voice rumbled through my tiny kitchen, too loud in the quiet. You surprise me. You've got spirit, but you've made your point. You're also, I assume, realizing you've made a $19,200 mistake. Be an adult. Apologize to my son, and I'll consider helping you with, say, 25% of the cost as a gesture. A sort of wedding gift, if there is still to be a wedding. He paused. Don't drag this out, Sienna. It's unseemly. He hung up. They all thought this was a negotiation. They thought I'd had a tantrum, that I'd come crawling back, cheeks flushed, saying I'd gotten emotional, begging their forgiveness so I wouldn't have to eat that bill. The entitlement was almost funny, if it hadn't been sitting on my Amex balance accreting interest. I tried to focus on work. The day after the party, I went straight to my workshop and started planning a board of white oak I didn't actually need for anything. The machine screamed, shavings curled up like pale ribbons. Normally, the sound calms me. It's predictable. Honest. You know exactly what's happening. Material is being stripped away. You can see the result. But that morning, my hands trembled on the board. I shut the planer off after 5 minutes and just stood there in the sudden silence, heart pounding, ears ringing. I wasn't a heroine. I wasn't some cool-headed avenger. I was a woman who had just spent $1,900 on the most expensive, most humiliating dinner of her life. That wasn't a win. That was a problem. By the time the pounding on the steel door started, my nerves were frayed down to threads. I knew it was him before he said a word. There's a rhythm to Julian's impatience. 3 sharp knocks. Pause. 3 more. Like he's worried about scuffing the paint even while he's shouting. Sienna, open the door! I wiped my hands on my apron and went to the entrance. Through the small wired glass window, I saw him. Perfect hair, coat thrown on over an expensive sweater, fury radiating off him like heat. I unlatched the door and pulled it open just enough to step into the doorway. We need to talk, he snapped, brushing past me like he owned the concrete floor. No, I said, we really don't. I'm working. He spun around, eyes blazing. You embarrassed me. I just looked at him. You embarrassed me, he repeated, louder. You made me look like a fool. You made my father look like a fool. Your father stood in front of 200 people and called me 10 rungs below your level, I cut in. And you laughed. You humiliated me. You humiliated my parents. The only difference is I'm not going to marry you over it. His mouth opened and shut. He looked offended. Betrayed, even. Like I was the one who'd told the joke. Dad was joking, he insisted. You know how he is. You just overreacted. You made a scene. I ended a scene that never should have started. He took a step closer. I smelled his cologne, some expensive citrus and smoke thing that used to make my knees weak. Now it just reminded me of the country club air. You're being ridiculous, he said, lowering his voice. Let's be adults. The party was a gift. You offered to pay. You can't just ungift something because you're in a mood, Sienna. That isn't how this works. I stared at him for a long moment. It was like looking at a stranger, wearing someone I loved. The party, I said slowly, was a gift conditional on an engagement, on mutual respect, on you not laughing along while your father tried to cut me down in front of my parents. He rolled his eyes. Oh my God. The condition broke, I continued. You and your father broke it. You got exactly what you wanted. Your 200 friends and associates ate the food, drank the champagne, listened to the quartet. You can pay for it. He let out a short laugh, sharp and ugly. It's on your card, you idiot. You already paid. I know, I said, feeling a strange calm settle over me. And I'm going to get that money back. He stared at me, like he wasn't sure if I was joking or delusional. You are not seeing a dime from us, he said finally, voice icing over. You humiliated us, Sienna. I am not paying for the party you ruined. I didn't ruin it, I said. Your father did. You co-signed. Now you all get to pick up the tab. You're out of your mind, he snapped. Maybe, I said, but at least I'm not laughing at the woman I say I love. His face flickered at that. For a second, I saw something like shame move through him. Then he shoved it down. I'm not leaving, he said. Yes, you are. I stepped forward, hand on the door. This is my workshop, I said quietly. You don't get to come in here and talk to me like I'm an employee who messed up a display. This is my space, my life. Get out. Sienna. I shut the door. He pounded on it for another minute, his voice muffled through the steel. Eventually, the footsteps retreated. I leaned my forehead against the cool metal and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then I did something I should have done before I ever swiped my card at that country club. I called a lawyer. His name is Miguel Santos, and if you looked at him on the street, you'd think he was a mechanic or a bouncer, not someone who spends his days dissecting contracts. He has a thick beard, heavy eyebrows, and a way of listening that makes you feel like you're describing the scene of a crime he's already solving in his head. I sat in his cramped office with my hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee, telling him everything. The contingent conversation, the 10 Rungs speech, the laughter, my parents' faces, the voicemails, Julian's visit, Frederick's 25% gift if I apologized and accepted the bill. When I finished, Santos sat back in his chair and stared at the ceiling for a long time. "So," he said finally, "they're old money." "That's one way to put it." "They hate two things," he said, "public scandal and losing." He looked back at me. "We're going to use both." I blinked. "I thought you were going to tell me I'm screwed." "Oh, you are," he said mildly, "but not in the way they think. This isn't about a hurt feeling at a dinner table, it's about a contract." "A contract?" He nodded. "Engagements aren't just about romance. They're about a mutual agreement to marry. You spent $19,000 and change in furtherance of that agreement on a party hosted in their space for their people. Then they publicly mocked you, and your fiancé publicly endorsed it, making it clear they didn't intend to treat you as an equal partner." "That sounds poetic," I said. "Does it sound like anything to a judge?" "It can," he said. "You didn't just flip a table and storm out. You articulated, in front of witnesses, that their conduct made the engagement untenable. That matters." He pulled a legal pad toward him, started sketching bullet points. "We're going to send them a demand letter," he said. "Formal, boring, terrifying. Laying out exactly what happened, how Frederick's statement and Julian's response constituted a breach of the agreement to marry, and demanding reimbursement for all party-related costs. Can we do that?" He gave me a look. "We can do whatever we can argue." He wrote as he spoke. To Julian West and Frederick West. Breach of contract to marry. Reimbursement of engagement party expenses. He read portions out loud as he drafted. We lay the facts out. Frederick's 10 Rungs comment. The laughter. Your public termination of the engagement as a direct response. The invoice. We demand the full $19,200 jointly and severally, since they hosted at their private club and invited the bulk of the guests. My stomach twisted. "And if they say no?" "Then we evaluate our next steps," he said. "But step one is putting them on record." The letter, when it was finished, was a quiet little bomb. No capital letters screaming revenge. No dramatic language. Just dates, numbers, quotes, and a demand for payment. We sent it certified mail. Then we waited. 48 hours of nothing. Then, on the third afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, the area code downtown. "Sienna Brooks?" a smooth male voice asked when I answered. "Yes. This is Thomas Sterling, counsel for the West family. We're in receipt of your opportunistic letter." Opportunistic, I gripped the phone tighter. "Let me be blunt," he said. "You will cease and desist all contact with my clients. You will not receive a dime. You publicly humiliated Mr. West and his parents. If you pursue this, we will file a countersuit for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and the full cost of Mr. West's non-refundable wedding-related expenses, including his $15,000 tuxedo and deposits. We will argue that you breached the engagement, not them. You are a very small operator, Ms. Brooks. Do not pick a fight with giants." He hung up. For a moment, I just stood there in the workshop, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dead line. Then the adrenaline hit. My hands started shaking. My vision narrowed. All I could see was the Amex balance, the interest ticking up, the mental image of courtroom doors slamming behind me while men in suits discussed my life like a file. I called Santos. "He threatened to bury me," I said, voice unsteady. "He said they'll sue me for defamation and emotional distress and wedding tuxedos." On the other end of the line, Santos was quiet for a beat. "Good," he said. I stared. "Good?" "He threatened you," Santos repeated. "He called you small. He tried to scare you off. It means he and his clients are worried." "It's working," I said honestly. "It's supposed to," he said. "Take a breath. We're not done." There was a pause. "What about the ring?" he asked. I looked at my left hand, at the pale indentation where the band had sat for a few weeks, at the memory of the custom walnut box on Julian's dresser. "I didn't just buy a ring," I said slowly. Julian did. I don't know exactly what he paid, but that stone is at least 2.5 carats, 22,000, maybe more. I built the box for it. Figured walnut, maple inlay. It was a lot. Who has it? Santos asked. He does, I said. Julian. He took it back the night I broke the engagement, or maybe the next day. I don't even remember. It's a blur. Perfect, Santos said. Perfect? Sienna, he said. Engagement rings are conditional gifts. The condition is the marriage. When that condition is broken by the donee, the person who receives it, they're not entitled to keep it. And his lawyer just implied they'll hang on to it and charge you for their dress socks while they're at it. He exhaled, and I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. This isn't just about revenge anymore, he said. This is survival. Between the party and the ring, you're looking at roughly $41,200. We're not going to let them walk away with that because they're used to getting the last word. I pressed my free hand to my workbench, feeling the solid wood under my palm. I was still scared. The Wests were still rich, still powerful, still the kind of people whose lawyers use phrases like, "don't pick a fight with giants." But for the first time since I walked out of that country club, I felt something under the fear. Not triumph, not anger. A thin, stubborn line of resolve. If they were going to turn me into a cautionary tale anyway, I might as well write some of the story myself. I'm in, I said. Whatever we have to do. 4 months later, I learned what it actually means to pick a fight with giants. The first punch didn't come from a courtroom. It came from silence. Clients stopped calling. Emails went unanswered. 2 of my biggest interior design firms, both steady customers who accounted for half my annual revenue, dropped me within a week of each other. Same tone, same script. Sienna, we're so sorry. The clients decided to go in a different direction for the hotel lobby. Sienna, the penthouse commission is on indefinite hold. Budget concerns, you understand. I understood perfectly. Frederick West sat on the board of one of those firms. He didn't need to ruin me loudly. He just needed to tilt the board an inch and watch gravity do the rest. Overnight, my business went from comfortably surviving to bleeding out. The Amex balance was a monster eating interest. My supplier started calling about invoices. I started selling old equipment, pawning off wood stock I'd been saving for special orders. Meanwhile, Julian was thriving, at least on the surface. He posted a photo on Instagram, black and white, moody, his hand brushing against his temple, no ring. The caption read, "Sometimes you give your whole heart to someone and they throw it back at you in front of 200 people, learning to heal, learning to be strong." 20,000 likes. The comments were a masterclass in selective memory. You're so brave. She never deserved you. You'll find someone who knows your worth. He'd positioned himself as the wounded romantic, the good man publicly shamed by a bitter woman. And I was the villain. It was almost elegant, the way they did it. Frederick strangled my business in private. Julian strangled my reputation in public. A 2-pronged chokehold executed with silk gloves. I showed all of it to Santos. Screenshots, canceled contracts, even a DM from one of Julian's friends that just said, "Maybe next time you'll think before humiliating people who can buy your whole building." Santos stared at the messages like a surgeon examining x-rays. "Tortious interference," he said finally, his voice low. "It's almost impossible to prove, but what they're doing fits the pattern. They're not just defending themselves, they're attacking. So we escalate." "Escalate how?" I asked. "We file," he said. He meant it literally. Not another letter, not a threat, a lawsuit. A real one. Filed in Superior Court, not small claims. Public record. The complaint listed 3 causes of action. Breach of contract to marry, demanding reimbursement for the engagement party, $19,200. Return of conditional gift, the $22,000 engagement ring. Tortious interference with business, naming Frederick personally for using his influence to destroy my client relationships. When I read the document, I felt sick. It wasn't the numbers. It was seeing it all in black and white. West family, 10 rungs below, country club humiliation, my humiliation, carved into legal paper that anyone could request from the clerk's office. But Santos was right. Old money hates public records. We filed on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. "Ms. Brooks," a familiar voice said. "Thomas Sterling." He didn't sound smug this time, just tired. "My clients are displeased with this public spectacle," he said. "So am I said. "So is my credit card." "My clients deny all allegations of interference," he continued, vehemently. "However, in the interest of privacy and to avoid a protracted and messy affair, they are willing to discuss a global settlement." "Global settlement," I repeated. It means everyone walks away, he said. They drop their counterclaims for emotional distress. You drop your lawsuit. No money changes hands. I almost laughed. So, they get to ruin my business, keep my money, and keep the ring? A sigh crackled down the line. What do you want, Ms. Brooks? I looked across the workshop. My planer sat idle, dust gathering on its edge. I want what's mine, I said. The next day, I sat in Santos's office. He was flipping through papers, his pen tapping against a coffee mug. They're bluffing, he said. We'll counter with full reimbursement for the party and return of the ring. Not its value, the actual ring. Both sides pay their own legal fees. We drop the tortious interference count. And if they say no? He smiled, slow and feral. Then we subpoena Frederick's board communications and make him explain that 10 rungs below joke under oath. When he said it like that, it almost sounded fun. We sent our counteroffer. Silence for 24 hours, 48. Then Sterling called again. His voice clipped. Ms. Brooks, my clients agree to a meeting to discuss terms. The meeting was held in Sterling's downtown office, a place with views so high they looked down on the clouds. When I stepped out of the elevator, I almost didn't recognize them. Frederick looked smaller somehow. His perfect posture sagged just a little. Clara sat beside him, pale, clutching her designer purse like it was armor. Julian. He looked exhausted. The curated elegance was still there, but the confidence had curdled into something brittle. Santos and I sat across the massive mahogany table. Funny thing was, I could tell it was veneer. Cheap core, expensive finish. Like everything else about them. Sterling slid the agreement across the table. Read it, he said. Santos scanned, nodded once, and signed. I added my name below his. Then Sterling reached into his briefcase, pulled out an envelope, and placed it in front of me. A cashier's check. 19,200. The numbers looked unreal, like part of a dream you're afraid to touch. Then Sterling turned to Julian. The item. Julian didn't move. Julian, Sterling repeated, sharper. Julian reached into his bag. For a second, I thought he wasn't going to do it. Then he pulled out the box. My box, the custom walnut with maple inlay. He slid it across the table. It stopped in front of me. My fingers brushed the lid. The grain was smooth, warm, familiar. I flipped it open. The ring sat inside exactly where I'd placed it the night he proposed. Glittering, perfect, cold. I closed the lid and nodded. We're done. Santos gathered the papers, stood, and shook Sterling's hand. As we turned to leave, Frederick's voice stopped us. You'll regret this, he said quietly. You've made a powerful enemy. I turned back. No, I said. I just made a clean break. He blinked, caught off guard by the calm in my voice. You're the one who paid $19,000 for a plate of bad jokes, I added. Seems like you got the short end. Julian's throat worked like he wanted to say something, but all that came out was a broken, Sienna. I walked out before he could finish. That night, I sat in my workshop long after dark. The check was in my bank account. The ring, still in its box, sat in my safe. I'd sell it eventually. Not out of spite, out of practicality. The shop was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator in the corner. I ran my hands over a slab of rough oak waiting to be shaped. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't a winner. I was just whole again. 4 years lost. $41,000 clawed back. And a hell of a lot of scar tissue in between. I turned on the planer. The roar filled the space, drowning out everything else. The memory of chandeliers, the laughter, the sound of my own name in Frederick's mouth. The oak slid through the machine. The smell of clean raw wood filled the air. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace. I wasn't 10 rungs below anyone. I was right where I belonged. Back in my shop, building something that would last.